Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Conscious Eating Evolution series. I'm Karina, Conscious Eating Catalyst and Soul Relationship Guide, and have created this series to give you more holistic overview around the transformative power of food, so you feel more enabled and empowered to make healthier and more mindful choices for yourself and this planet. And today we're going to have a closer look into the pillars of health and creating planetary healing through the synergy of love, compassion, peace, and action with John Pierre. And John is a nutrition and fitness consultant who has devoted more than a quarter century to helping and improving the lives of others through his expertise in the areas of geriatrics, nutrition, fitness, women's empowerment, green living, and cognitive retainment and improvement. He not only trains celebrities, hardcore athletes, and many people with diverse backgrounds and fitness levels, but is now pursuing his lifelong dream of building a sanctuary and retreat center for homeless and neglected animals, women, and young girls who are recovering from abuse, called Living with Harmony. John, I'm so incredibly happy that you join us today. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. I would love to start with you a little bit, like what brought you, like, so people know a little bit more about you, where you're coming from, how did your life unfold, where did you start in a way of bringing you to the point and promoting health and fitness so much through your work?
Sure. So I've been following a vegan lifestyle for about 35 years or so. I started around senior year in high school. And the two oral reports I did in high school senior year were women's rights and animal rights. So I kind of got into it all around maybe junior and senior year in high school. And just ever since then, it's pretty much what I've done full time for 35 plus years. So it's I've worked with battered women for 30 years. And then I've worked just as long with the animal rights community. And then, of course, the environmental community. And then my actual background is in geriatrics. So for about 25 years or 25 years ago is when I started or so working in senior centers, adult daycare centers. And basically I created the first brain building programs in the United States using a plant-based diet and then different like nutraceuticals for the brain. And then I did a lot of classes on fall prevention and safety for seniors also.
Wow. And so you have written a book about the pillars of health, and I would like to talk a little bit about that. Like, share with us what the principles are for creating vibrant and lasting health and why they are so important.
Sure. Well, one of the first principles is obviously following as close as you can to a plant-based diet. So one of the challenges that I've seen with working with clients that would come in my office, it would be like a revolving door of client after client after client that was prematurely aging. So I would see clients that would come in that would be in their early 40s, but they'd perform and look like they were in their 60s. And so I just start seeing this pattern occur with clients that this premature aging and all these diseases would be taking place very early on, especially diabetes. So diabetes and obesity. I'd have kids come in the office that were 12, 270 pounds. So they had diabetes, they had the diabetes and the obesity. Of course, they already had heart disease because we know we see heart disease in children as young as 3 that have been killed in automobile accidents. When they autopsy their body, they're already finding plaque and sometimes blockages already in their arteries with children. So we know, these kids have that. And so the plant-based diet was really the antidote for most of these clients that I worked with, whether they were morbidly obese or they had diabetes or they had heart issues or strokes or whatever. It was following more of a plant-based diet. So the biggest challenge is most of my clients, and many of the vegetarian clients too, just don't eat enough volume of vegetable matter. They'll eat a veggie burger on a bun and put a piece of lettuce and maybe a tomato, or maybe have a tiny little salad. So it wasn't, they just weren't eating enough volume. So one of the things that I really encourage clients to do is to increase the amount of volume that you can eat of vegetables and fruits. And I do that really 2 simple ways. One is with a smoothie. So I like people to make a smoothie every day. And sometimes people get nervous when they hear smoothie because they think I'm talking about just fruit. And no, I've never mentioned that. What I'm saying is a smoothie is just blended vegetables and maybe a low glycemic fruit like blueberries, for instance, or any berries. And then basically lots of greens in there in either some sort of non-dairy milk, like whether it's going to be sustainable coconut. Because by the way, when you buy coconut milk, you want to get coconut milk that's non-monkey picked. much of the coconuts today, the coconuts are picked by babies. They steal them from their mother and they train them to climb up trees and pick them. So you want one that's sustainable, that isn't, it's what we call monkey free. So whether it's coconut milk or some people might use almond milk or soy or whatever, and then they'll put some organic frozen blueberries in there and some greens, and then maybe a little ground flaxseed or hemp seed and maybe some spice like pumpkin spice. I would have them do that. And then if they don't like smoothies, I do a warm smoothie, which is the blended soup. So I would just have them make a blended soup with vegetables and maybe sometimes beans or a little bit potatoes. But this way they're getting a massive amount of plant-based matter in every spoon that they take or every drink that they take.
Mm.
So those would be two things that I do for clients, smoothies and blended soups. Of course, I still encouraging them to eat salads and use fruits and vegetables throughout the day, but many of them still are a little resistant to it. But if I could just get them to do those two things, that will go a long way in terms of improving their health and getting more phytochemicals and nutrients in their body.
Mm. So one of the principles is your food choices, and what are the other principles as well that go along with your like pillars for health?
Oh, sure. Well, the other one is, of course, movement. So we don't really need exercise per se at a gym. You can go to a gym and take classes, that's fine. But what your body depends on is movement, and the key word is throughout the day. So you just can't go to a gym for an hour in the morning and then the rest of the day is sedentary living. It's more important that you're constantly moving throughout the day because your body demands movement to function. In other words, every time you move, you bend, you squat, you push, you pull, you reach, you're turning on switches inside the body that are activating our whole body, whether it's your nervous system or it's bone density, or it's alleviating depression, or increasing circulation or enhancing the lymphatic system. But the secret is you want to move throughout the day. So one of the pillars is constant movement. And I use the term sneaking it in, and I tell people you just want to sneak movement in throughout the day. So you want to sit as little as possible. You want to constantly be moving. If you have to sit for your job, if you can't get a standing desk, then make sure that you get in and out of your chair as much as you can, because sitting is not only very dangerous for your muscles, but it's dangerous for your immune system. Your respiration slows down, your balance isn't activated. It causes what we would say is like sensory motor amnesia. Your body is shut off. So I ask clients to live a very active lifestyle. And the other thing is I ask them to use, take little pieces of exercise gear, like a medicine ball, a set of weights, some exercise bands, and put them in each room in your house. So when you go in the kitchen, you maybe do some push-ups off the counter. When you're watching television, you have a set of hand weights or exercise bands, and you sneak it in maybe when the commercials are on, or just throughout the movie or whatever you're watching. But the idea is to be in a constant state of movement throughout the day and sitting as little as possible. The more that you can get on and off the floor, the better it is for your health. It's one of the biomarkers of aging, actually, is the ability to transition from the floor in a quadruped position, on your hands and knees, and be able to get up. That's a very important attribute that we need to have. So the easiest way to do it is just start practicing it. Mm-hmm. So I'll just have my clients, I'll ask them in the morning to get and do that, in the afternoon, in the evening. So at least they do it 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. So that would be the second one, is movement. And then the third one is really where my background is enhancing cognitive functioning. One of the challenges that we have is when you're young, everything is brand new to you. So everything you smell, you taste, you see, you feel, you touch, you look at is stimulating your brain. So your brain is constantly growing. Your neurons basically grow these dendrites, these branch chain projections that allow these neurons to communicate throughout the body. And they grow so rapidly when you're an infant or a child that at some point your body has to prune them because there's so many. But when you get into be in your 30s and 40s, the question is, what's new for you? Nothing. You do the same things over, you eat the same foods, you have the same friends, you watch the same shows. So your stimulation now is not there anymore. And so what happens is your brain says, if you're not using it, you lose it. So basically these things wither away and there's less connections. So one of the important hallmarks of what I teach is to constantly stimulate your brain and your body with new and innovative things. So in the retirement homes, I would lead courses, 3 to 4 times a week at these facilities, and they were my brain building courses. So as soon as I came in, everybody got paper and pen, and they had to write their name with their opposite hand. So they had to write it 10 times and most people on the first time, literally some people could not even grasp the pencil or the pen with their opposite hand. And eventually, after weeks and sometimes months, their handwriting with their opposite hand looked pretty comparable to their dominant hand. So it just took practice. And then we constantly would do different games for them with the seniors, not things like the normal brain stuff, but more stuff like I would ask them questions like, for instance, I'd have them write the alphabet down the page with their opposite hand, and that would take a while. Then I would ask them to give me a fruit or vegetable that begins with each letter of the alphabet. So, we could say artichoke or arugula. Some people might say apple. For B, you could say beets or bok choy. So I'd have them go down the list. And then, of course, at the end, when they were done, we would go through, see which ones they missed. And then the next 2 days or 3 days when I'd come again, I'd quiz them again. So I'd make them remember the stuff they missed. Like most everyone misses N, which would be nectarines. So tons of them would miss that. So when I come 2 days later, that's the first thing I would ask them. What's the fruit or vegetable that begins with N? So it's stimulating the brain, going and doing things that are out of your comfort level, using your opposite appendages, whether you're using a ball with your hand, throwing a ball back and forth or something like that. Just anything that you're doing something that's unique. Learning a language, of course. But if you like Sudoku and you love it, I'm going to ask you to do crossword puzzles. But if you love crossword puzzles, then I'll ask you to do Sudoku. So I want you to do what you're not comfortable with. And you just want to keep pushing yourself just ever so gently. You don't need to be extreme because you always want to come out winning. You don't want to, like, I wouldn't go into retirement home and ask them to memorize, 20 numbers because the average person can memorize 7, right? That's why your phone numbers are short. But most of those folks didn't even know because of technology with cell phones, especially now, they didn't even know 1 number. So you always want to make sure you're doing something where it's doable and pushing you a little bit. You don't want to get frustrated because then you'll quit. So like I wouldn't ask you if you could learn to speak French and Polish and Russian, in the next month, right? I would ask you to maybe learn a couple words in that language every week. So that would be the other pillar. And then the most important pillar, what I wanted to write my entire book on, which is the most meaningful to me and what means the most to me, is the most important pillar is love and compassion. Because love and compassion is really the universal antidote to almost all of our problems. Because every day from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you're getting washed and rained upon with anger, hatred, jealousy, rage, just tons of negative emotions constantly. You're being bombarded with everywhere you go. It's negative. As soon as you turn on the news or the radio, it's all negative. It's sensationalism. And that takes a pounding on your system. Not only does it hurt you emotionally and evokes depression, but from an immune system, it beats your immune system up. So what I try to do is I ask people to be hyper conscious of the words that they use because, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can tear your heart apart. Working with abused women for over 30 years, the one common thing I heard from most all of them was they'd say to me, John, my husband or my boyfriend or my father or my brother really hurt me the most with the words that they used at me. So they were constantly belittling them or cutting them down, and they never forgot those words. Many of these women can remember words when they were in their, 6 and 7 years of age, and now they're in their 30s. They still remember what their parents said to them. So what I ask people to do is be hyper conscious of the words that you use. They should always be words of encouragement and love and compassion, some way that we're building people up. So I don't like in my vocabulary, my personal vocabulary, it's very difficult for me to say the H word, H-A-T-E. It's hard for me to say it unless I'm doing a talk like this. I can let it out, but it's not part of my normal vocabulary. And you want that to happen because you don't want those words to just come out, okay? So the other thing is just be careful of the words that you allow into your fertile garden, your brain. So every time you're listening to gangster rap music or you're listening or watching violent shows, those are words they're permeating your brain and your spirit, and you have to be conscious of them. So I ask people to do their very best to be conscious of social media, be conscious of the shows they watch and what they listen to. Because when you listen to gangster rap, and most children are listening to it, it's extremely violent. It's like XXX pornography in the audio world. It's very violent. And, I spoke at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. for about 150 congressional people. And I said to them, look, you've got 12-year-old children today that still have baby teeth. And they're watching XXX pornography. They're listening to gangster rap. They're playing video games where you assault people. you run over animals in the video game and score points. And if you couple all that with a nutrient deficient diet, where you don't have the right nutrients to make the proper neurotransmitters, you've created a very dangerous predator. So we need to be very careful about what's happening with children today, because these children today, they don't have cognitively, they're not all there. I see them when I was in my working with clients around the clock, I would see kids come in all the time that attention deficit, hyperactivity, violence, it was just a normal part. And now it's still the same thing. So I want people to be conscious of the words they use, conscious of the words that they allow into them, and then be conscious of your actions. You know, every action, everything that you do is a vote. So every time you buy something, you're voting for something. So, so one of the things that we do, you know, my nonprofit is Living with Harmony, and we basically have a ban on single-use plastic. So we don't buy single-use plastic, because that just ends up getting in the landfill and eventually the ocean. And then a whale ends up eating it, and birds end up eating it. And I've been before to Florida, and I've gone to the aquatic hospitals, and you see these animals that died, the birds, the pelicans, and when they cut them open, they're just filled with plastic, just everything. I mean, literally, there's been whales who've eaten plastic garbage cans, just unbelievable. So be conscious of what you vote for. One of the things that I do is when I go to the farmers markets, I buy my blueberries or strawberries, but I'll only buy them if they're in cardboard like this. I won't buy them when they're in plastic. I just won't buy them, because that's just wasteful. So I make sure that when I buy stuff, I'm conscious of it. I make sure that I use glass straws, because these plastic straws we really need to avoid. And then I use, you know, we have like just kind of your own utensil kit. And you can buy these. This was one of my favorite ones from the Sustainability Duo. These are some of my friends that make this kit, and it comes in a little bag. But you can also go to a thrift store, and you can just buy, you know, just stainless steel, and just keep them in your purse or in your backpack, so you always have it. You don't need to use plastic utensils. And then, of course, when I go shopping, I bring my own bag, because just think about every time you're getting produce and you pull one of those plastic bags off, right? And then when you're done with it, poof, you throw it away. And it's like, if you think of how many times we go shopping, most of us shop at least once a week, and there's 52 weeks in a year. That's at the minimal 1 or 2 bags. They're just going into the landfill and ultimately ending up in the ocean. So from the love and compassion, I just ask people to just be hyper conscious of what they say, what they hear, what they see, and be very conscious of that vote, because it's like voting for a presidential candidate. You're basically voting he or she into office. So when you buy from a company, whether it's a good company or not, you're giving them the thumbs up or the thumbs down if you boycott it. So those are kind of the 4 main principles that I shared within the pillars of health.
Wonderful. And I would definitely like to dive in, especially into the first one and the last one.
Okay.
And pick a little bit of the third one related to the first one. So I want to know is, how does food really affect our cognitive function, and how can we enhance our cognitive function through the food that we are eating?
Sure. Well, as long as we're eating food that grows from the earth in its whole form, unadulterated, we're pretty good. It's when we start getting into these hyper-palatable foods that are, not only are they high in usually salt and oil and sugar, that we start running into a problem, because then the brain gets addicted to them. And then all of a sudden we're all constantly drawn into that direction, and we move way away from fruits and vegetables and say nuts and seeds or tubers or whatever, the foods that have the nutrients for our brain. The best way to think of it is, if you have a lock and the combination is 5, 10, 15, and you go 5, 10, 14, you're only off by 1 number, but the lock won't open. Well, that's how the brain is. If you don't give the brain the right amount of nutrients, these neurotransmitters in your brain's not going to function properly, because they're missing that 1 nutrient. It's kind of like if you pick something, like let's say L-carnitine, which is an important substance. You know, carnitine comes from the Latin word carnis, meaning meat. So vegans don't eat it. We don't eat animal products. So where do we get our carnitine? Well, we get our carnitine because our bodies can synthesize it. But it can't synthesize it unless you give it the right nutrients. So you need lysine, methionine, pyridoxine, niacinamide, iron, and vitamin C. Well, what if you were low in lysine, which comes from legumes, because you didn't eat enough legumes? Well, then your body's not able to make this one particular nutrient. Does that make sense? So it's just, sometimes you have to be 100% in things. So for the brain, the brain is one of those highly metabolic organs out. It's constantly on, it never sleeps. And it has a lot of demands. And not only does it need fuel, particularly carbohydrates, it need hydration and everything, but you have to have nutrients so it can structure and make these neurotransmitters. So as long as you're getting a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, and particularly legumes, beans, peas, or lentils, which are really important, generally you can do okay. Where vegans run into a problem, and the average American, is that we're eating about 150 pounds of sugar per person. And in order to take sugar and to turn it into energy, your body uses B vitamins in that process. It uses other things like chromium and magnesium. But if you start using up all these B vitamins are for normal cognitive functioning. So basically, the more sugar you eat, right, the more B vitamins you're going to use up. That leaves less B vitamins for neural functioning. So you do need to be conscientious as a vegan or somebody who's trying to eat healthy about the amount of sugar you eat, the amount of fat you eat. When you start slathering oil on everything, or you eat tons of avocados or handfuls of nuts and seeds or nut butters, your blood starts getting thicker, and these red blood cells, they start clumping together and they stick together like Velcro, and they don't move very fluid throughout the arteries or the capillaries. In some capillaries, red blood cells might move single file, especially in the eyes. They're small. So when you start getting this traffic jam because there's too much fat in your diet, that's another problem. In most Americans, it's high fat and high salt and high sugar. So that's kind of the nutrition thing. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think like the sugar part is really an important aspect as well. How does it really affect our cognitive function if we have too much sugar in our diet, especially processed sugar?
Yeah, well, again, the main problem is that you're losing nutrients. So that'd be the main thing.
That's
Number two, you get rebound hypoglycemia. So you get a really good high, and then after that high, you come crashing down, and the first thing you want is more sugar again. So literally what happens with a high sugar diet is you get bipolar. You get very moody. You get highs and then you get lows. So you almost have to keep on a steady stream of sugar in order to maintain that. But if you would just switch to complex carbohydrates, particularly legumes, like especially beans, or even like potatoes, that will keep your blood sugar steady and calm, which is what you want. And you also don't want to be flooding your system with insulin all the time, because insulin's a fat storing hormone, and it can start causing problems also with inflammation. And Alzheimer's or dementia, just like many other diseases, are based on inflammation. So a high sugar diet causes inflammation, which disrupts normal brain functioning, amongst other things in your body. So the more anti-inflammatory agents you have in your diet, like blueberries and greens and omega-3s from like flax or walnuts, the better off you are.
Awesome. And what big component do toxins play in regards to our health, especially those that are found in food? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, it was interesting. I had a client come in the office that was a cosmetologist. So her job is to particularly deal with the skin. And she had really bad acne. And she just couldn't do anything about it. And she was severely constipated. She would normally have a bowel movement once a week. And she was a very young girl. And she was using lots of whey protein, milk protein, casein, which is a binding agent. Casein is what is in like glue. It's a binding agent. It makes things stick together. So people who eat a lot of dairy or use milk protein often get constipated. And the problem is constipation is actually one of the biggest diseases and maladies, if you want to say out, because when your body can't express toxins, they get absorbed back into the system. So it's called autointoxication or toxemia. And those toxins damage your cells. And the challenge, one of the biggest problems is today, when people are eating fish, let's say, fish is one of the highest sources of contaminants in the world, because how many oil spills have we had in the last 15 years? And there's oil spills that are still going. So you have huge amounts of toxins in the water, particularly a neurotoxin like mercury, but you have PCBs and different contaminants in there. And when they get inside your body and they can't get out, those are getting inside to your system and they cause some serious damage, especially mercury, which is a neurotoxin. And then you combine that with all the people that are eating, just say a hamburger, it takes about 12 to 15 pounds of grain for a cow to produce a 1 pound burger. So those 12 to 15 pounds grains are highly contaminated with pesticides and herbicides, insecticides. So you got 12 pounds of grain, and now those go into your 1 pound burger. So then you put that on 2 pieces of white bread, which have no fiber on it, and you are eating a constipation sandwich right there. You're eating something that's going to cause constipation, and all those poisons and toxins have no way to get out. They stagnate inside the bowels and get reabsorbed back into your system, making you full of toxins and, damaging your cells. So the nice thing about when you follow a 100% plant-based diet, we get, depending on how much you eat, but maybe 70 grams of fiber a day, which the average American gets maybe 15 grams of fiber a day. So when you're following a full plant-based diet and you're not eating processed foods, your bowel movements are working fine. You're also eating foods like fruits and vegetables, even if they're not organic, which I would prefer if you could get it. Even if they're not, the fiber chelates or binds onto the heavy metals and toxins and escorts them out the body. But when you're not eating fiber, they're just sitting in the system.
Yeah, powerful. And as we're already talking about toxins, I would like you to talk a little bit about the quality of water and what we can do to, like what can we do? Like what is in our water and what can we do to have cleaner water, drinking water?
Oh, sure. Well, your body's about 70% water, and your blood, when it's healthy, is about 92% water. And as your blood starts getting hypovolemic, you start losing or getting subclinical dehydration, the blood moves very slowly through the system. So it's almost like putting molasses through the arteries instead of red wine. It moves things slow. So drinking water and eating water is super, super important. And what I mean by eating water is fruits and vegetables. But if you're going to drink water, you want your water to be as clean as possible. The challenge is today in the water is birth control, which is birth control is in the water. Psychiatric meds are in the water. And of course, you've got BPAs, you've got arsenic and chlorine, which basically cleans the water of bacteria, but it still damages the system. So the water system that I use is one called Clearly Filtered, and they make a pitcher, they make a water bottle that has like a straw, and then they make an under-the-counter unit, etc. So that's the one that I use. It's the easiest I've found, and the results are excellent. You could use a distiller. Distillers are really good too. They basically remove everything. The only negative thing about distillers, similar to reverse osmosis, reverse osmosis uses a lot of water and takes time, and distillers take time. So this particular company that I like is Clearly Filtered, but everybody has their own different filters they like. But you're bringing up a good point. You want to be drinking as clean water as possible. And when you start seeing that some of these fish that are like in the Potomac River are developing both sexes. Yeah. And one of the reasons is because of all the contaminants in the water. And one of the big ones is people buy, I don't care what type of water it is, when it's in plastic, that's a problem, because once that plastic gets heated, then it starts leaching more into the water. So you really don't want to be buying water that's in plastic. You could get home delivery of water in glass, which would be fine. But if you're going to do that, I'd recommend getting distilled water and instead of spring water, because spring water really needs to be tested. It doesn't really, when they say spring water, that doesn't really tell me anything. Yeah, I know it's a spring, but if you go to Arkansas, let's say, for instance, and there's a spring, Arkansas has one of the highest amount of chicken processing plants. Where do you think all that fecal matter goes? And it's like people don't realize one of the biggest problems is agribusiness in terms of polluting the water, because all that fecal matter, when you have 100 or 200,000 chickens in just one area, that's a lot of fecal matter every 24 hours. And then you've got a pig farm down the block, and then you've got cows, and you're just pumping all that stuff into our earth, and it ultimately gets in the groundwater.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point that you just pointed out. Definitely. Yeah, I would really like to know from your personal perspective, how does our food choices really affect our evolutionary process as a human species?
Our food choices affect what?
Our evolutionary process as a human species. Like what would your perspective be on that?
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting is when you look at people who are having, if you take two people that, let's say, are heroin addicts and alcoholics, and they have a child, I mean, could you imagine the genetic issues you have right there already with the child? Then from a psychological standpoint, imagine how that child will be raised. So the more health that you can bring to humanity now, the more that as we continue to have children and, the human race continues, the healthier they'll be. But the more disease that we have in people, not only physically, but emotionally, the more that the next generation is going to be born with emotional problems and physical problems. So I think it's absolutely imperative that parents really take a very strong interest in what they're eating. Like, especially now, let's say you're in your late 20s and you're thinking of having children. I mean, my gosh, you should really be thinking about what you're eating now is going to affect your child, and then that's ultimately going to affect their children. So it's one of the most important things. And I think we need to be very concerned, because if you look at the generations that keep being born, there's, you know, a lot of cognitive issues with these kids. They almost all universally have attention deficit, hyperactivity. Many of them have violence. You know, when you go back into the 70s and you look at something like the Feingold diet, where they took artificial colors and flavors away from children, these children that were normally hyperactive and starting to go crazy, they responded extremely well when they got rid of these poisons and toxins out of their food. And then you reintroduce them to the children, the kids would go berserk again. Unfortunately, we're not removing any of these toxins from children today. We just keep inundating them with poisons and toxins. So if you were to take a guess at the way we are evolving, it's kind of scary, actually. It's very scary, not only emotionally, but physically.
So have you had any experiences in your practices with ADHD that you have worked with?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote in the Pillars of Health, there was a boy, I think it was 9 psychiatrists and 6 psychologists, and then medication. Every medication they gave him for attention deficit, hyperactivity, and violence, nothing worked. Then they gave him experimental meds, nothing worked. So finally they bring him to me. And what I did is I got rid of gangster rap, for sure, got rid of video games, put him on a 100% vegan diet, and got him on B12, which is very important for brain health, and then DHA, which is just a healthy omega-3. And actually DHA and B12 help form the myelin sheath to allow electrical impulses to travel on the nerve. And they're important for, you know, normal brain functioning. That's why DHA, if babies don't get enough DHA, they're born with retinal and brain abnormalities. So those are important nutrients. So when I put that particular boy on that, boom, within a couple of weeks, he started getting better. And with a month or two, he popped back to normal. And everyone was shocked. But it's because, here's the key thing, is we changed his lifestyle. I'm not going to say it was just his diet, because he did say to me later, he said, you know, JP, you were right. He said those video games and like the gangster rap music was really influencing my brain, because it was always jacking him up. He was always hyped up by watching it or listening to it. And then his diet was really hyper palatable foods. It was lots of sugar and lots of fat all the time. So he never had this calm, stable brain. So for kids with attention deficit, absolutely, it's critical. And of course, I see kids like that all the time. The challenge is, though, is you have to say that your child is a drug addict. You have to admit to that as a parent. Your child's a drug addict. We're not making a judgment. So it's not going to be easy taking Junior off their drugs. Just like a heroin addict, they're going to fight you. So the way to do it with children is, the earlier that you can give them these healthy foods, the better. But if they're already as a drug addict, you need to start slowly sneaking in smoothies so they can start getting these healthy things, making them like a vegan ice cream, where you just take some frozen mangoes and put it in a blender with some soy milk or something, and it whips up, and start giving them that and slowly getting good into them. Because you just generally, from a child, you just can't take it all the way, because they're going to have too much peer pressure from all their friends. So yeah, it's very difficult. That most of the kids that I've worked with, unless they've been extreme, like this one particular boy that I worked with, they don't want to change, because everyone else in them is all jacked up on Ritalin and all these psychotropic meds. And it's almost like they, that's how this generation lives. Many of these kids.
That's normal, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. You'd be surprised at how many people are on psychotropic meds and how many kids are taking these meds and can't function without them. And they sell them at school. It's a big commodity. So it's unfortunate, but and many parents don't know. And to be honest with you, it's not the parents' fault, because they're not trained in nutrition and health. They don't know any better. They just think what they're giving Junior is good. You know, they don't know any better. It's not their fault. So they need to get educated. It's like the work that you're doing with these summits and things. You're bringing this information out to people so they understand, and it makes them think, oh yeah, that does make sense. If I don't give my brain all the nutrients it needs, it can't create the neurotransmitters, and you're going to be always jacked up. You know, if you're driving 70 miles an hour on the highway, and then all of a sudden you go on the side street, that 35 miles an hour or so, even less, feels like you're going really slow. Your body has to adapt to that. And it's the same thing with our diet. We have to neuro-adapt to having less stimulation all the time. And that's hard at first because you feel like, wow, you're getting tired or things feel slow. But once you neuro-adapt, then everything gets normal and you're fine. And I'll tell you, there's not many things my clients have rejoiced from as much as saying to me, one of the best things ever is having a calm, stable brain. That's like one of the greatest benefits, that they're calm and stable all the time. They don't have these spikes, these highs and lows. It's what I call like a dietary induced bipolar.
Wow. Oh, that's really interesting information. And why do you think that a compassionate lifestyle is so important for planetary healing?
Oh, well, gosh, I mean, the planet's in absolute peril. I mean, we don't even know if we'll continue existing the way things are going. I mean, the way I look at it is it's our responsibility. It's our absolute obligation to take care of Mother Earth the way Mother Earth takes care of us, provides for us the oxygen, the food, the water, the comfort, everything. It's our responsibility to take care of the earth and everything we do. And that's why it's so important to transition toward a pure plant-based diet. And then once you get at a plant-based diet, this is where most plant-based people are missing. Then they think that just because they're plant-based, everything's okay. No, look at your food. How much packaged food are you eating? You're buying foods that's in a box. You open the box and that's in a plastic package too. And where does all that packaged stuff go? When you throw that stuff away, there isn't a way. That's a backyard. It's somebody's backyard, whether it's a human or an animal. So, once we start thinking about our actions, like recycling, yeah, it's good, but we don't want to recycle, actually. We want to avoid recycling. When I go buy clothing, I want to go to a thrift store and I want to recycle. I want to buy somebody's clothes that they got rid of. They didn't want it. I don't need to buy a new blender if I can get it from a thrift store, right? I want to try to reuse stuff. Whatever I have, I'm going to mend it. I'm going to sew it and try to fix it. And then I'll go to a thrift store and look for it. And then if I have to buy something new, like new underwear or something, obviously, you want to try your very best to get something that's organic, cotton, fair trade. And you want to get something from a vendor that's like who you want to support. Because when you give your dollar to that vendor, that's supporting them. So that's why fair trade and organic is important. But all our actions with the planet are going to have to start with your diet, first of all. You have to, because you're eating at least 3 times a day. And those are 3 votes a day that you're making. And if you're eating animal products, there's not many things that are going to be more disastrous than that. Not counting the animals' well-being in their life, but the destruction to the planet. Because as I said earlier, just think for 1 second the amount of fecal matter that's being dumped into the earth every second around the United States alone. It's just unimaginable. And all the transportation costs, and that's another thing, transportation. I mean, we really need to think about carpooling. We need to think about biking. We need to think about walking more, instead of putting these vehicles everywhere just to drive 3 blocks to get a loaf of bread at the store. Walk, get a bike, carpool with people. We need to start thinking about that, because it's all affecting the earth. I mean, and then there's other things that people don't think about, like palm oil. There's no sustainable palm oil. We're destroying the oxygen center of the earth every time we're buying palm oil and destroying the rainforest. So there isn't sustainable. That's just marketing terms. So we first want to get people to go plant-based, but if you're already at plant-based, you need to take yourself up a couple notches too. Yeah, you can't rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
And same thing with buying organic. We need to buy organic, because every time that you're purchasing non-organic, you're basically giving the thumbs up to them to spray all these crops, which are ultimately you're ingesting, but all these insects are being killed, and then birds are coming eating contaminated worm, right? And then they're getting contaminated, right? And then they drop dead, and then a coyote comes and eats them, and that coyote gets infected with all these types of pesticides. It's a vicious cycle.
And what is your experience? What are common mistakes that people do, why they fail on a vegan diet or don't feel as energized or healthy or get other health issues? What are common mistakes that you notice that people do?
Oh, that's a great question. That's one of the big things you'd seen on the internet recently. People that will switch to a vegan diet. And I just want to clarify, there's a big difference between plant-based and vegan. Plant-based is a diet. and vegan is a lifestyle. So most people, when you meet them or you read them on the internet, they're not vegan. They're plant-based, which is fine. But most people who are following the plant-based diet are eating processed foods for right off the bat. So they're eating the veggie burgers, the veggie hot dogs, they're eating all the veggie ice cream and the cookies. So they're not eating a whole foods plant-based diet. So that's problem number one. Number two, a lot of people are not getting enough really nutrients. They're not getting enough those greens again. So you're not getting the salads and not getting enough fruits and vegetables. They're not eating enough of nutrients that would get them healthy. And then also it takes the body some time. You know, I've been vegan for a little over 35 years. So your body, if you become vegan today, your body's used to having like carnitine and creatine and these omega-3s already in their food. And so when you stop eating those foods, your body doesn't really know the chemistry exactly how to create them from these other matter, where if you've been vegan a long time, your body's learned to do it. So that's why sometimes you need to take some supplements. You know, B12 is non-negotiable. You have to take B12. If you're not in the sun enough, you're going to have to get vitamin D, because vitamin D, there's vitamin D receptors in the brain and they control your mood. And when people are low in vitamin D, they get this low level of depression. And so then they might eat something that's fortified with vitamin D and they feel better, or something that has carnitine in it or creatine and they feel better. So it takes time for your body to adapt. And the other thing is, it doesn't happen with everyone, but it happens more with women that I've seen, is they don't eat enough calories. They just think it's fruits and vegetables. So they're not eating enough starch. They're not getting enough potatoes in their diet, especially sweet potatoes or squash, and they're not getting enough legumes, beans, peas, or lentils. So they think it's just a celery and carrot diet, which of course it isn't. We want to get you those starches in your diet, and we want healthy fats in there too. You shouldn't be afraid of fats. So there's nothing wrong with avocados or some nuts and seeds or some olives in small amounts, unless you're a food addict. You know, if you're a food addict, yeah, then you have to be careful with those things. But generally people who are food addicts, they can take ground flaxseed and they can add it to something and they're not going to be addicted to it. It's only if they were open up a bag of nuts and eat 3 or 4 that they'll finish the bag. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And where do you personally see a connection between veganism and spirituality?
Oh, well, that's the most important thing in the world is the spirituality and compassion. I mean, if you haven't seen Earthlings, I highly suggest everyone watch Earthlings. And the movie after Earthlings was Unity. And I mean, I just think about it for a second. If somebody said to you, would you like to eat your dinner out of a bowl that, say, Buddha or Jesus made, or would you like to eat your dinner bowl out of somebody who was evil? Most people would say, I don't want anything to do with that evil person. I don't want any of their stuff. But yet think about what you're doing. I mean, you're paying somebody to kill an animal, to take the most precious thing to that animal, which is its life. And when the animal is going through a chute and getting ready to be killed, the amount of chemicals and hormones going through her meat is astronomical. She's fighting for her life. Well, I got news for you. All those chemicals are ending up in your meat. And it's one of the reasons we see people so aggressive today. And think of the karmic, if you want to say the spiritual impact. I mean, you basically just gave the thumbs up to take the most precious thing in the world, which was that animal's life. And the only reason you took it was for flavor. You're not taking it for health. You're taking it because you lust after the flavor of that animal. You took that animal's life for flavor. I mean, I can't think of many things that are more horrific than that. And I think it's a responsibility that everyone live a life of compassion and love. We have enough violence in the world. Just because you are not slicing that animal's throat or putting a competitive bolt into her head, you're still responsible 100% for taking that animal's life. 100%. It's just like if somebody was to hire somebody to kill somebody, right? The person who pulled the trigger goes to prison, but the person who hired the hitman goes to prison too, right? So don't think you get to escape that karmic event because you didn't pull the trigger. That's the worst thing, is that people just hide. They just hide behind that and say, I didn't do anything, I just bought it. Yeah, so I think that is, you know, in my book, The Pillars of Health, it's those last 2 chapters on love and compassion are the most important work that I do. I wish the whole book could have been that, but the publisher wanted other stuff that I teach.
And what do you think, why is there this disconnect for a lot of people that they don't really think about what really is on their plate? Because I think a lot of people are usually, like, we are innately loving and compassionate beings. That's my truly deeply believe. And what do you think where this disconnect actually comes from?
Well, the disconnect is the meat dairy industry is the masters of advertising. So that's why they'll call it meat. They don't call it cows or chickens, right? Or lambs. You know what I mean? They want to use different terms so you don't think about it. You know, when I became vegan, I would have became vegan as a kid, but if somehow I was reading something that what I was eating, the hamburger was once a cow, and I was like, well, what do you mean it's a cow? It's a hamburger. It's not a cow. And then chicken McNuggets, that was a chicken? No, that's not a chicken. It's chicken McNuggets. I didn't draw the distinction when I was a kid, but it was when I finally did in high school that I read and realized that what I thought was a hamburger was actually a living, breathing cow, and I quit eating that right away. Because once you realize what you've done, oh my God, the light bulb goes on. And same thing with dairy. When I got rid of all animal or all meat products, I still used some dairy products because I thought, well, that doesn't hurt an animal. Then all of a sudden I start reading, oh wait, you mean the animal has to be sexually assaulted? So the animal has to be sexually assaulted. She has to be sexually assaulted to produce milk. And then her baby's taken away from her, and she doesn't get to give her baby her milk. And I was like, oh my God, I would never drink milk again. So yeah, it's all interconnected. And I think once you see earthlings and see unity, if you have a beating heart, you'll change. I mean, that's why earthlings has always been called the veganator.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell you, I know I've trained Sean, who produced earthlings and unity, and here's a very, very strong, tough guy mentally, because I would be with him and this guy's watching 12 to 15 hours of this footage of animal abuse. I mean, it was unbelievable. And if you watch the first scene in Unity, so many people who saw the beginning of when they were making the movie wanted that scene out. And I remember saying to Sean, I said, that's the most important scene because it shows two cows going through a chute. I think it was in France. And the door closes and these cows know that their loved ones was in front of them getting killed. And they were just literally fighting for their life to get out. And I don't remember how long the scene was, if it was 7 minutes, but it was probably one of the most motivating scenes you'll ever see in your life, where you don't get to see the violence, thank goodness, whereas Earthlings you did. But it's interesting when you ask people to watch Earthlings and you tell them what's it about, they don't want to watch it. They don't want the truth. And that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
They don't want the truth. So I think that's what it is. It's the industry has fooled us, because they're not really, just like when I've gone to people and I've explained I'll start talking to them about the atrocities of animal abuse, and they go, shh, my kids are here. It's like, well, yeah, don't you want your kids to hear the truth? Yeah, I know your kids are here. Exactly. Let's educate them. Yeah, we want to tell the truth to the kids. The problem is when children find the truth, they don't want any part of it. And that's how we should be. We shouldn't want to be part of violence. I mean, don't you think we have enough violence in this world? You can't turn on the TV or the newspaper with every article is about some sort of violence committed against humanity. It's like the antidote to that is love and compassion. Stop committing acts of violence. Stop it. We don't need to do it.
Absolutely. So well said. And I think we can, if people would want to work with you, or if people want to, connect more deeply with you, or even read your book, where can they find you?
Oh, sure. So my website is livingwithharmony.org. And that's our nonprofit. We're trying to open up an animal sanctuary and retreat center in Colorado, so we can run retreats all year round. And we have one of the top vegan chefs in the world working with us, Mark Reinfeld, and one of the top vegan doctors, Dr. Lori Marvis. And so we're getting close. We just need a little bit more financial help and we'll be able to get that property. And then I also have my site, which I don't use as much, but you'll see me training Ellen DeGeneres on there, and that's johnpierre.com. And the reason I keep that site up is because they spent a lot of money making that video of me training Ellen. So I decided to keep it on there so you can kind of see me doing boot camps and stuff like that. And then my email, if you want to contact me direct, is foods, FOODS, FORLIFEJP So it's foodsforlifejp@yahoo.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And I'm usually at the veg fests around the country and traveling around quite a bit. But I do private consults all the time. That's one of the things I do quite a bit of. And then I work also with Chef AJ in Los Angeles. We have a program, Ultimate Weight Loss, and that's for usually people who are trying to lose weight or get healthier or who have food addictions.
Awesome. And so my last message that, my last question that I would, that I'm asking every expert on the summit is, what is your personal message of hope, if you do have one, for the audience? That you would
My
like?
personal message, that's easy, is to every day be as loving and kind to yourself and to every expression of life, every creature that you can, because you never know, what that, especially with people, you have no idea what that person is dealing with. I've worked with abused women for over 30 years and they look perfectly normal. But when you get to talk to them and you find out the trauma they had, you couldn't be kind enough to them. So always make sure that you're extra kind to everybody with your words and your actions, and make sure that everywhere you go, you leave love and compassion. No matter what was there, make sure you make it better. You leave it better somehow.
I love that. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, and I think giving very, very valuable content out here today. And thank you all for watching and joining us today. And please, please, please stay tuned for more incredible content on how to eat to improve your health, empower your spirit, and thrive with the planet. Bye. See you soon.